Hey, welcome back. Wow, you've gone through 10 of my books, and here you are on book 11. You're sticking with me. I appreciate that, and hopefully, you know, I might have encouraged you to go and check some of these things out to see for yourself, do some research, and see what God might have in store for you. But this next book, book number 11, is going to be one that will start, because the order I put these in are not chronological. I put these in order of a gradual from more widespread acceptance, gradually getting into more controversial things. So this next book is kind of taking a deeper, we're getting deeper into the waters. But the next book, now I have to be honest with you, I have not read all of this book. This is one of those books which, let me just go on and show you. The title of it is The Death of Death in the Death of Christ. And it's written by John Owen. John Owen was one of those Puritans. Now, he was not a Puritan of the same on the same level as Thomas Watson. This guy was, well, let me just tell you. Well, this part don't say. He was a scholar, so he was he was actually a teacher. He was in, I want to say it was Oxford or one of the big schools. Well, here it is. The church on the front that you see here, the Quadrangle of Christ Church, Oxford. John Owen was appointed dean of this college in 1651 and vice chancellor of the university in the following year. So he was the dean of this school. Very educated guy, and his reading is not easy. A matter of fact, in his preface to the reader, they always did that back in those days. Let me find it and I'll share it with you. It was written to a certain person. Here it is, to the reader. Reader, if thou intendest to go any farther, I would entreat thee to stay here a little. If thou art, as many in this pretending age, a sign or title gazer, and comest into books as Cato into the theatre, to go out again, thou hast had thy entertainment. Farewell. So, what he's saying is, well, the next sentence says, with him that resolves a serious view of the following discourse, and really desireth satisfaction from the word and Christian reason about the great things contained therein, I desire a few words in the portal. What he's saying is this is no light treatment of this topic that he's dealing with here. So he's saying that if you're the type person that just wants to read snippets and tidbits and headlines and what's those cliff notes, those kind of things, he said, you might as well go to somewhere else. He said, but if you're serious and you desire to know, then this is the book. Now I'm going to tell you the reason I haven't read it all is because he is a lot like Jonathan Edwards to me. Jonathan Edwards is probably easier to read than this guy. But to me, a lot of it has to do with the way they wrote back in those days. Because, just like if you've ever read anything by Charles Dickens, people in those times, they were wordy. I mean, language, they had a larger vocabulary than we use today. And they may spend 20 words to say what we would normally say in like 5. I mean, so you have to read and you have to really digest what you're reading. So it's not an easy read. But the subject is this. And this is why I say it gets into the controversial camp. The whole book is defending from Scripture what is often called limited atonement. Now, that is one of the 5 points of Calvinism, as it's often referred. But, limited atonement is such a horrible phrase. What it really is saying is specific atonement. And the idea is this, and he defends it. So I would say that anybody who wants to just outright reject that doctrine, read this book and feel free to write an argument showing where he's wrong. That's my challenge. But, because I'm going to tell you, this guy really, he digs in. Chapter 7 here says, containing reasons to prove the oblation. Now, that's a word you have to look up. O-B-L-A-T-I-O-N. And intercession of Christ to be one entire means respecting the accomplishment of the same proposed end and to have the same personal object. Like I said, it's a hard read, and the language is a big barrier, mainly to trying to understand. But he talks about how Scripture points that every bit of language, both in Old Testament and New Testament, that speaks of the sacrifice of Christ, the atonement, that the language itself demands that it is for a specific people. In the Old Testament, it was all those who would bring their sacrifices. It was for the people of Israel. In the New Testament, it's for all those who will believe on Jesus. So, the atonement, the sacrifice, only applies to them. Because the only other answer, if it doesn't apply only to them, if it applies to those who reject, who don't believe, then that means their sins are paid for, even though they don't believe it. And so that means that they're gonna be redeemed. They're made right with God, which leads to what? Universalism, right? Which means everybody. But then, the argument comes back, well, it applies to them until they reject it, and then it no longer applies to them. But that's not what the language of Scripture says. It doesn't say that. And if all their sins are covered, we know that unbelief, rejection of Christ and God, is a sin in and of itself, is it not? So that means that one must not have been paid for. So anyway, like I said, it's controversial. I'm not trying to start an argument here. I'm just wanting to expose you to this book, to let you know that this guy, John Owen, that's what he does in this book. Is he's actually writing against some people that were advocating universalism. And so he's writing against them, saying that no, Christ didn't pay for the sins of unbelievers. Christ paid for the sins of believers. So, anyway, you can check this book out if you dare, if you're brave. There's an essay in the front written by J.I. Packer, which was an author of one of the books that I had introduced you to you earlier, Knowing God. He writes an introduction article, which actually is probably one of the best definitions of what Calvinism is, true Calvinism. Because like everything else out there, you got different flavors of things, and there's some people who will take things to extremes to the point to where it's no longer what it originally was. And when people hear words, they have connotations associated with that word. So if you want a true, honest definition of what true Calvinism is, you can check out his article in this book, his preface to this book, The Death of Death and the Death of Christ. So there it is. I have stuck my foot out there. I have played my hand. And so you can see, hopefully I haven't lost you as a viewer or a friend or a subscriber. Hopefully you'll continue to listen and let's dialogue and engage. And I want to share some more books with you that have impacted my life.